Alright, so today I want to introduce you to the Xplosive Cream Ball Python. It's a pretty rare combination of genes. I actually went over to morphmarket.com where they have almost 250,000 ball pythons listed over there, which is pretty crazy. And out of all those snakes, they've only ever had one Xplosive Cream listed over there. It's actually a 5-gene combination. It actually consists of the fire, the vanilla, the pastel, the spider, and the Mojave. Essentially what it is, it's actually a vanilla cream with the combination of the fire and the vanilla with a bumblebee on top of that with the pastel and the spider, and then on top of that you actually have the Mojave, which is in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. And I'd say if you're actually working with the Xplosive Cream, it can be one of the more challenging projects to actually work with. So for example, if you actually took the Xplosive Cream and you bred it to something else, you couldn't reproduce it because it actually contains an allelic combination between the fire and the vanilla. So in order to reproduce it, you'd have to actually breed it to either a fire or a vanilla to make another Xplosive Cream. And the other challenging part is it contains fire, which is in the black-eyed leucistic complex. So if you breed it to something that contains fire, 25% of the time you'll end up with a completely white snake with black eyes, and the super fire will completely mask all the other genes. And you also have a gene in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So for example, if you actually took it and bred it to something like Bobby, the bamboo here around my neck, this snake is also in the blue-eyed leucistic. So if you actually made a Mojave bamboo, that would be a completely white snake with blue eyes. So you have a possibility of getting a white snake from the black-eyed leucistic complex, a white snake from the blue-eyed leucistic complex, and then you also have spider. And with spider, you have to kind of be careful because if you actually breed it to another spider, or for example another champagne, the super spider or the spider champagne are lethal combinations. So 25% of the time you'll get eggs that won't completely develop, which is a pretty tricky project when you're working with the Xplosive Cream. So today I want to jump over to the internet and I want to show you the individual genes and how they come together to form the Xplosive Cream and some of the limitations when breeding it to other combinations. Alright, so I'm going to jump over here on morphmarket.com and I want to start with this snake right here. So this is where things get a little bit more complicated with the Xplosive Cream. So this snake right here, this is either a fire or a vanilla. So essentially where this came from, this actually came from a vanilla cream, which is the combination of the fire and the vanilla, which is actually an allelic combination. So if you take a vanilla cream and you breed it to something else, half the offspring come out as fire, half come out as vanilla, and in a lot of cases, you can't tell the difference between a fire and the vanilla, which is another complicated part of the project. So if you actually took an Xplosive Cream and you bred it to something else, all the offspring would be either fire or vanilla, and in a lot of cases, you can't tell the difference between your fires and your vanillas, which is really complicated when you go to sell the offspring, and you get something like this, especially with other genes in the mix, then you don't know if it's fire or vanilla. And if you actually look at fires and vanillas working into other combinations, I'd say in the most cases, both of them actually act as kind of a brightening gene, which really lightens and brightens a lot of your combinations. And a lot of times you can actually tell the difference between these and a normal ball python. You can actually see in your fires and vanillas, it'll be a little bit brighter than a normal, and in a lot of cases, you'll actually see a really strong head pattern on your fires and vanillas. You can see on this one, it has a really strong head stamp. I actually did a video on fires and vanillas. As a matter of fact, it seemed like the fires were really variable when it came to the head pattern. I've seen some fires with really faint head patterns on the top of the head that almost look like kind of the faint head pattern you'd see like on a normal ball python. Sometimes it's really hard to tell the difference between the fires and normals just looking at the head pattern, but I'd say in most cases you can definitely tell by a lighter, brighter, kind of a creamy color with a lot of your fires and vanillas. And where you can actually tell the difference for sure if you have a fire or a vanilla is when you produce the super. So take a look at this. If you actually take a fire, breed it to another fire, 25% of the time you'll get a super fire, which is an all-white snake with black eyes. And kind of the interesting thing with these super fires is sometimes you'll see a little bit of faint yellow spotting along the top. I've actually seen some that's a little bit brighter. I've seen some super fires that are completely white with no yellow at all on the top. And the kind of the challenging thing with the super fire is if you actually have other genes under the super fire, it'll completely mask every other gene. I don't think there's any other gene in ball pythons that I've ever seen break through the pure white of a super fire. So you can have like 5 or 6 genes underneath this white snake and you wouldn't know it until you bred it to something else and proved it out by looking at what you produce from the hatchlings in the super fire. So take a look at this. So this is the super vanilla, definitely different than the super fire. It's not a white snake. It's not, technically the vanilla is actually considered to be in the black-eyed leucistic complex because it's allelic with fire, even though it doesn't produce a white snake in the super form, which I thought was kind of interesting. And if you actually have 2 copies of the vanilla, you'll actually get kind of this scrambled up pattern compared to the super fire. And if you actually take the vanilla and you mix it with the fire, you get the vanilla cream. Take a look at this. So this is one component of the explosive cream, which is the vanilla cream. And I absolutely love the vanilla creams and the vanilla cream combinations. It makes for some really amazing combinations, even though it's kind of a challenge to work with the project. I'd say it's similar. I'd say that pretty much the only similar challenge that I've seen that's similar to like vanilla creams would be like the yellow belly complex, when you have like the gravels, the asphalts, and the yellow bellies mixed together. It's kind of the same way if you actually take like a highway or a freeway and you breed it to something else. You know, you either have like an asphalt or a yellow belly. You don't know which one's which. And it's kind of the same challenge with the vanilla creams. So here is the pastel. One of my favorite genes to add to the vanilla cream is the pastel. And when you add pastel to the vanilla cream, you get the vanilla scream, which is hands down probably my favorite combinations as far as working any other gene into the vanilla creams. And the pastel is kind of interesting. I've actually seen some pastels that are really bright. I've actually seen some that are pretty browned out, but it seems like as far as what I'm seeing, it doesn't really matter how bright it is. A lot of times when you work pastel into the vanilla cream, it still has a really dramatic effect as far as really giving you some impressive combinations. So here's what happens if you take the pastel and you work it into the vanilla cream. Take a look at this crazy snake. This is the vanilla scream, one step closer to the explosive cream. And this is a pretty interesting combination, how the pastel can really jumble up the pattern on top of the vanilla and the fire. And most of the times you'll actually know you have a vanilla scream because it'll have a brighter yellow color with the addition of the pastel. It seems like when you add pastel to fire, the fire really can brighten and enhance the pastel. So a lot of times it really doesn't matter what version of pastel you have because of the addition of fire that really enhances the pastel, which is kind of an interesting combination. And a lot of times you can actually see on the top of the head by adding pastel, it really cleans up the head in these vanilla screams. It's a pretty amazing combination. So here is the spider, and the spider is another gene in the explosive cream. And let me tell you, the spider is probably one of the best standalone genes as far as a really visually impressive gene. It almost has this spider web pattern coming down the back of the snake. And kind of the interesting thing with the spider is a lot of people ask me, hey, what genes do I have to mix together to make a spider? And it's actually just one gene. You can take a spider, breed it to something else, and you'll get 50% spiders. And it almost looks like, it kind of looks like in some of these spiders, it has like calico coming in the side because of the white coming up the sides. It almost looks like it has enchi because enchi reduces the pattern and it's just actually one gene. And some of these spiders can be really super bright gold. It's one of my favorite genes, probably up there with the pinstripe. The pinstripe and the spiders can make some really super bright gold snakes, which is pretty amazing. But the thing you have to worry about the spider is breeding it to other genes is in the I kind of consider him to be in the spider complex. So you really don't want to breed the spider to a spider or a spider to a champagne because it's a lethal combination. And here's what happens if you actually add spider to the vanilla scream. You get the vanilla scream bee. And take a look at this. It's kind of interesting when you work spider into this combination that a lot of times in a lot of these combinations, the vanilla creams, a lot of times it'll completely mask the spider pattern in the combination. I thought this was kind of an unusual example where you can almost make out the spider in this combination. And a lot of times it'll really jumble up the spider pattern where it really just kind of explodes it with the vanilla cream. And this one actually has, this is actually the vanilla scream B. So keep in mind when people say B, they mean either the spider or the combination of the pastel and the spider. So sometimes B can be a little bit confusing. And in this case, if you actually look at it, this is actually, we're calling this a B because it has spider, and we're actually calling this the vanilla scream because it's the addition of the vanilla, the pastel, and the fire, which is kind of interesting. Sometimes the B is the combination of the pastel and the spider combination. So you kind of have to look at the common name compared to all the genes in the combination. So for example, if you actually had like a lesser B, the lesser B is the combination of the lesser and the spider. And if you actually added pastel to that combination, instead of the lesser B, you'd actually get the queen bee, which gets a little bit confusing with the B's in some of your combinations. You know, when I first started, I thought B just meant the combination of the spider and the pastel, which is kind of interesting. And then you see some interesting exceptions like the lesser bee and like this one here, the vanilla scream bee. So here is the Mojave. The Mojave is the last gene in the explosive cream with all these other genes layered on top. And the Mojave is actually in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. It looks really similar to the lesser, but I'd say it's definitely different than a lesser ball python. The Mojave can have a darker background than the lesser. And usually the Mojaves are known for kind of these keyhole patterns on the side of the snake. As a matter of fact, if you actually make a lot of Mojave combinations, working Mojave in with other genes, a lot of times it has a really strong influence of bringing these keyhole patterns over to a lot of your other combinations. And the Mojave is also in the blue-eyed leucistic complex where you can make some really bright white snakes. If you actually mix the Mojave with the lesser or the Mojave with the bamboo, you get the white snakes. But you can also make purple snakes, which are also considered to be blue-eyed leucistics. So if you take Mojave and work it in, for example, with the mystic or the phantom, or you can actually make like the purple passions or the mystic potions with the Mojave, which is kind of interesting. So here's what happens if you actually take the Mojave and you work it into the vanilla scream bee. Take a look at this. You actually get the explosive scream with all these genes on top of each other. And it's kind of interesting. You can almost pick out all the genes in the combinations. As a matter of fact, on this one, you can almost see maybe a little bit of the spider coming through, and you can kind of see the shattered pattern from the combination of the vanilla and the fire, a little bit of yellow coming out from the pastel. And the other thing that I found kind of interesting with this combination is if you actually look at the eyes on this one, it almost looks like it has slightly blue eyes. And I found in certain combinations, if you actually take one gene in the blue-eyed leucistic and work it in certain combinations, sometimes it'll actually give your snake blue eyes, which is kind of unusual because usually if you have a blue-eyed leucistic with the bright blue eyes, you'll actually have two genes from the blue-eyed leucistic coming together to give it the blue eyes. Of course, in most cases, you'll actually get either like a purplish snake or a bright white snake. And I've actually seen some lesser combinations that have blue eyes, just one gene from the blue-eyed leucistic, just a lesser in with a bunch of other genes that can kind of randomly give a blue eye, which is pretty interesting. So I actually have one example over here of the explosive cream over on Morph Market. It's pretty amazing. There was just one in all of Morph Market. That last one was actually from the world of ball pythons, the explosive cream. So this one's kind of interesting. You actually see even more of an influence from the spider on this one. And it seems like this is even a little bit more yellow compared to the other one. You can definitely see the really faded out head from the combination of the vanilla scream kind of coming through on the head. And I was actually trying to look at this one if it had blue eyes or not, and it doesn't really look like it has blue eyes. It's kind of interesting. I see some of the lesser combinations with the blue eyes, and it seems like every now and then you'll find one with blue eyes and you'll find another one that's exactly the same with the same exact genes that doesn't have blue eyes. So I'm not exactly sure what's going on with the eye color. It seems pretty random in some of these snakes when you just have one copy of a gene in the blue-eyed leucistic complex. So I actually wanted to show you one last thing over here. This is the genetic wizard over here on the world of ball pythons, just to kind of show you how complicated this can be when you're breeding into something else. So take a look at this. You actually have, I actually plugged in an explosive cream over here. This is the Fire, Mojave, Pastel, Spider, and Vanilla. And if you actually took this and you bred it to a normal ball python, you actually wouldn't reproduce it. So in order to reproduce it, you'd have to breed it to something that contained fire to make another explosive cream. It gets a little bit complicated. So take a look at this. If you actually did this pairing, these are the odds down here. You wouldn't get any normals because keep in mind the fire and the vanilla is an allelic combination. So that's one of the advantages, although the odds of getting a normal with this many genes is pretty slim anyways. So that's one of the things that, you know, some people say, hey, I want to do an allelic combination because I want to avoid the normals. But on the flip side, especially with a lot of genes, it seems like the complexity of doing an allelic combination kind of outweighs the risk of getting a normal ball python. A lot of times when people are breeding like 5 gene combinations, they almost never get a normal, which is kind of crazy. So if you actually take a look at this, it has quite a few combinations all the way down here. You'll actually have a 1 in 32 chance that you'll actually reproduce the explosive cream, breeding the explosive cream to a fire. But the other kind of the complicated thing, so take a look at this. If you actually look closely at some of these combinations, what you'll actually find is some of these will be like this one. You'll actually have the Pastel Super Fire. So keep in mind the Super Fire is a black-eyed leucistic, an all-white snake with black eyes, which will completely mask the pastel. And if you actually look down at some of these, you'll have quite a few Super Fire combinations. So this one, you'll have a Super Fire Pastel Spider. Even down here, way at the bottom, you'll actually have a Super Fire Mojave Pastel Spider, Super Fire Mojave Pastel. All those combinations would be just white snakes, completely white with the black eyes, and you wouldn't know which genes were in there. So it's like 25% of all these would actually be an all white snake. So this is where it gets a little bit complicated. So if you actually had something like, say, if you actually had like a Fire Bamboo Spider or something like that, the odds of actually getting anything that you could recognize would be kind of difficult because 25% of the time you'd end up with the white Super Fires, and if you had bamboo in there, you'd actually have a Bamboo Mojave, which would be a white snake with blue eyes. So 25% of the time you'd have a white blue-eyed leucistic, and if you actually had a spider in there, 25% of the time you would actually get a non-viable egg from that combination. So let me tell you, if you're working the explosive cream into other combinations, you have to be really careful as far as the other genes that you work into this combination. All right, so it is time for the question of the day. And Jay Quinn asks, I have a super yellow belly leopard male. I'm looking to get a female to breed to the snake. Which one would you buy? And that is a very good question. I have a lot of people asking me, hey, I just picked up the snake. What should I buy to pair with that snake? And keep in mind, it's actually an ivory, which is the super yellow belly, which is an all white snake. And there's really only 2 genes that I know of that can really break through the ivory, the all white snake, to bring some pattern through that snake. And that is the leopard and the Anchi. So that leopard ivory probably has some pattern coming through, and it's a pretty amazing combination. And keep in mind, it's actually a yellow belly. So what I would actually go for is something in the yellow belly complex. Pretty much hands down, my favorite yellow belly complex would be the freeways with the combination of the asphalt and the yellow belly. But keep in mind, you're actually kind of going down the same rabbit hole as the vanilla creams. You'll actually go over to Morph Market or look at some of your reptile shows, and a lot of people will list their snake makes is this is either a yellow belly or an asphalt, and you can't tell the difference between the two. So sometimes it can be a little bit complicated, but sometimes you can actually get for sure an asphalt. So for example, if someone actually had a super asphalt and they were breeding it through their collection, some people actually know 100% that yes, this is an asphalt combination. So what I would actually do is I would actually take an asphalt and probably work in something like something that works really good in with the freeways. So pretty much hands down, one of my favorite freeways I'd say is the banana freeways. If you actually seen some of those are pretty amazing. Or the pinstripe freeways can be pretty amazing. So what I would actually do is I would buy something like an asphalt, banana, pinstripe or something like that with some of those really amazing genes where you can make some freeways and then add some other genes into the combination. The pastel freeways are pretty amazing. So what I would actually do is do something like a super pastel. You could also work Enchi into the mix too if you're looking to make some more ivory combinations with the Enchi and the leopard to really break them out of the combination. You can actually do that too. So something like, I'd probably do like a super pastel, Enchi, banana, pinstripe, asphalt, or something like that. Some of those genes to make some really amazing freeway combinations. So that is pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I will see you in the next video.